Welcome to Red Pill Revolution. My name is Austin Adams. Red Pill Revolution started out with me realizing everything that I knew, everything that I believed, everything I interpret about my life is through the lens of the information I was spoon-fed as a child. Religion, politics, history, conspiracies, Hollywood, medicine, money, food, all of it. Everything we know was tactfully written to influence your decisions and your view on reality by those in power. Now, I'm on a mission to retrain and re-educate myself, to find the true reality of what is behind that curtain, and I'm taking your ass with me. Welcome to the revolution. Hello and welcome to Red Pill Revolution. My name is Austin Adams and this is episode number 10. Episode number 10, officially out of fingers. I can no longer count with my hands, got to take off my socks and count with my toes. So this is episode number 10 and we got some crazy stuff going on this week. Literally just hours ago, Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of 6 counts. So we're going to jump into that almost right away. We got a couple other things we're going to touch on, including the Build Back Better bill getting blocked, and as well as somebody from CNN getting called out by Project Veritas for some creepy pedophile stuff. Lo and behold, I even saw a Babylon Bee. Gotta love the Babylon Bee. Babylon Bee put out a meme basically that said, since Ghislaine Maxwell got found guilty of sexual assault on children, she announced her career starting at CNN. Thought that was funny. Anyways, moving on. Let's go ahead and jump into it. But you know the drill. The very first thing I need you to do before we do that is I need you to go ahead and press the subscribe button. It takes you just a second. It means the world to me. I love doing this for you guys. Go ahead and press the subscribe button right now. Just got to tap that little button. The next thing I need you to do is go head over to redpillrevolution.substack.com. We've been putting out all sorts of content between our podcast companions, where we're posting the actual links that we're looking at to the videos we're watching on the actual podcast itself, whether I'm posting books that I recommend on the specific topics that we talked about that week, and the video right away, whatever it is, go ahead and join the Substack. We're going to be putting out consistent content. I actually just put out a research paper that I wrote on the dark history of the CIA, a scholarly paper, and you can check that out if you want a little bit more detail on last week's podcast. This week's podcast is going to be great too. We're going to throw up all of our videos on there, so go ahead, head over to redpillrevolution.substack.com and sign up. It's free to sign up. If you want the extra little goodies, it's like $7 a month, which works out to be like $1, I don't know, 50 a week. I don't know. Go ahead if you could. I appreciate it so much. I love doing this for you guys, like I said. And any little bit that you guys can help, whether it's throwing in on that paid Substack for just $7. If you can't afford the $7, I get it. I love putting this stuff out just for free for you too. But if you can afford that $7, and I know there's a lot of you out there who can, go ahead and sign up. I'd appreciate it so much. It just gives me a little bit of validation knowing that what I'm doing is worth something to you, even if that's just the cost of a cup of coffee. So $7, sign up for Substack. And if you can't, it's free too. You just get a little bit of extra if you sign up, pay that $7. So thank you guys so much. Again, press that subscribe button. If you're on Apple Podcasts right now, 5-star review, press that 5 stars. I'd appreciate it so much. And without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing we're going to talk about in this week's podcast, in this week's show, is going to be the new and, not so new to everybody who's been talking about this for a few months, but the actual new implementation in the United States of the Show Me Your Vaccine papers. There's been actually people getting kicked out of restaurants, kicked out of bars, pushed out of public buildings and offices in New York and several states across the country for not having vaccine papers on them. It sounds unbelievably dystopian It sounds like something you absolutely never could have guessed would have happened in this decade, in my life, in your life, I'm sure. But it's happening all around us. And there's an old saying, I wish I had it off the top of my head, but a buddy told it of mine and told me it. And it talked something about how, the during World War II, something about how, they came for the gypsies, and I wasn't a gypsy, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for the, insert whatever it is, and they didn't, I'm not that, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to say anything. Which to me just says, like, speak up, man. If you don't live in New York, I'm over here in a Midwest area. If you don't live there, just because it's not happening where you live doesn't mean that you're not next, right? So we have to speak up about these things. We have to post about it. We have to talk about it. We have to voice our opinions, and we have to voice our opinion with our votes, and let people know this is unacceptable. We're not going to take this. And in terms of this vaccine paperwork, it seems absolutely crazy to me that this has become reality. I definitely saw that was going to be the case. Eventually, we talked about this, that this was coming up, but a lot of people didn't believe us. So here it is. Let's go ahead and watch this video.
Show me your papers. More and more Americans and people across the globe are hearing these ominous words. People are being required to show proof of vaccination or be denied the ability to dine peacefully in restaurants, hold jobs, or even attend school. Earlier in December, several GOP lawmakers in the New Jersey State Assembly were denied access to the Assembly chamber for refusing to show proof of vaccination.
You see this? See this, folks? It's denying us entry into our house.
This is America.
This is America. Illegal procedure, voting procedure they're relying on. It was deemed illegal, and they're enforcing it.
The state police are the best in the world, but they report to the executive branch and how outrageous a governor to turn the state police on the
This is tyranny, folks. America, see what's happening
Including
here.
our heroes up here.
See what's happening, America.
So what you're seeing actually there is a congressman or some sort of public office holder who is not being allowed into a specific vote because he's not showing his vaccine paperwork. So if you're watching this, follow along. Give it a second. I think they're going to come into this and talk a little bit more about it.
That's right. Members of the minority party were blocked from representing their constituents and voting on legislation for refusing to adhere to a rule that was arbitrarily created by a commission. This was overturned by an appellate court as there's nothing in the Constitution that requires proof of vaccination to vote. But they tried, and that should alarm all of us. If these were lawmakers of the Democratic Party who were blocked from entering the chamber to vote, we'd likely have seen endless news about voter suppression, and it would have been voter suppression. It is voter suppression. We intrinsically understand how wrong it is to block people from voting. We view voting as a basic right within a democracy, something we hold dear. Scenes of lawmakers locked out of chambers, be they Democrat or Republican, or scenes of hundreds of people busting into the Capitol to prevent a vote from happening shakes us to our core. We know it's wrong. It's an assault on our democracy. But we don't seem to have that same intrinsic understanding when it comes to other things like the right to an education.
All right. So, she's basically just explaining what happened. He was trying to get in to do a vote, was a part of the GOP, and they wouldn't let him in just because he wasn't vaccinated. Crazy, the fact that they're going to do that to people who are actually, the fact that they're going to do that about anything, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's, voting on the Senate floor, whatever it is, that should scare you. The craziest thing about this is, growing up and hearing about World War II, hearing about the Nazi Party, hearing about, we all heard about the outcome, right? We all heard about what it got to be, right? At what point and how this discrimination became and what we didn't hear about was how it got to that point, though, right? How regular people, normal people, allowed these things to happen, and we're seeing it play out again today. It's like they're trying to cleanse of a ideology, right? It's literally an attack on freedom of thought. If you are now somebody who does not want to be vaccinated, that does not want to go through the process of becoming a part of this human experiment, then you're ostracized. You can't get a specific jobs. You can't vote if you're in politics. You can't go to the grocery store or go, I guess you probably go to the grocery store, I hope, at least in New York, but you can't go to restaurants. You can't do a lot of these things. I mean, we're literally seeing people pulled out and dragged out of these shops and out of these restaurants in New York on videos all of the time now. And, we thought it was just in Australia. And Australia is a crazy case. I mean, I saw this video where there was this woman sitting on her porch of these detainment centers in Australia, where they literally put you in this like 5x5 house or 10x10 house when you come back to quarantine. If you're showing no symptoms, you have to quarantine. And so you go to this basically like smaller than a trailer size home. And there's these like cops who walk around and enforce these stupid rules about not like leaving even your porch. Let's see if I can find that real quick.
So what's the go?
So this, I'm going to give you a warning, yeah? It's an official warning that you have to stand in the balcony and obey the rules while you're here, yeah? And that's, we have to go the rules again. I don't care.
So am I allowed to go to the laundry?
You're allowed to go to the laundry, but you got to wear a mask, yeah?
Yeah, righto.
Yeah. And you definitely can't go up the fence anywhere else, but you're allowed to go to the laundry, yeah? That's always been the case, yeah?
Right, so if I was sitting just here, which is right near the fence, why are these guys in a cabin that's right near the fence? It makes no sense, does it?
Yeah, but you can't leave your balcony to go to the fence to talk to somebody else. That's just obvious, yeah?
So if I was
Again,
at that
it doesn't have to
balcony...
make sense. There has to be lines everywhere drawn, yeah? And one of the lines is you cannot leave your balcony and you cannot go to someone else. Where it makes no sense or it doesn't seem right to you, that is the line, and that's what the law is, yeah? And that's how it goes, yeah?
The law.
Well, the show direction.
There's a law that says
show
that.
direction, yep. There's a show direction, yeah? And how the behavior must be done, especially in this area because it's much more highly infectious and likely to have infected people, yeah?
Highly infectious when all of us people are negative.
So far, the risk is still very high, yeah? Just while you're here, can we just do that? Otherwise, the next time it's a $5,000 fine, and we don't want to do that.
It's a $5,000 fine if what?
If you breach again.
If I walk out onto that path.
Without your mask on, for no reason other than the laundry.
If I cross that yellow line,
saying that you've broken the rule.
that I've broken the rule, I will be issued with a $5,000 fine.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay. We could even do that now, but we're giving the warning first. Have a chat with you because it's a big fine. Rather just do the right thing, yeah? Like I said, I'm not here to fight with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight with you.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to do the right thing, and unfortunately it's my job to make sure they do. I don't care the ins and outs. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just here to make sure the rules are here. Yeah? All good, man?
So what did that experience make you think? Like what was your feeling about being in that situation with those people in control of your every movement?
Oh, it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. You feel like you're in prison. You feel like you've done something wrong. It's inhumane what they're doing. Like you are so small. They just overpower you and you're literally nothing.
So basically this woman was sitting on her porch in this detainment center and they were coming and yelling at her for even trying to walk off of her porch. And she wasn't sick. She had no symptoms. They said that she would be fined thousands of dollars if she decided to get up out of this porch again. And again, these are things that we thought could never happen in this universe, even in this decade. And we're seeing it happen in countries all over the world right now. And we're starting to see some of these things come to our shores in the US, and we're starting to see that with New York. And so, I really do hope that we're seeing enough of a pushback that this isn't going to happen in other states. But at this point, nothing would surprise me at this point. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So we're going to go through some of the updates from the trial. We're going to talk through, kind of what we missed maybe a little bit. And then we're going to talk about the actual sentencing itself and see if we can go into how much time she's actually going to get, right? There was 5 of 6 charges that she was found guilty of. And let's go ahead and we'll walk through what those charges even were. So the first charge, the count 1, was conspiracy to entice a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, which carries a minimum sentence of 5 years. Count 3, which she was also convicted of, was conspiracy to transport a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years as well. It seems extraordinarily low. If you find yourself in a situation where you're conspiring to transport a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, I've literally heard of people getting less time or more time for weed. That's crazy. But if you are conspiring to transport a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, that carries a maximum, not minimum, maximum sentence of 5 years. 5 years for intent to engage in criminal activity with a child and transporting a minor to do so. Beyond me. But luckily there was enough charges here that she's going to be away until she's fucking dead, scumbag. But count 4 was transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, which carries a 10-year sentence. I don't see how that's much different than the original. Count 5, conspiracy to commit sexual trafficking of minors, which carries a statutory sentence of 5 years. Maximum sentence of 5 years. Wow, that's unbelievable. Who would have thought that child trafficking, like not even just child trafficking, but child trafficking with the intent of engaging in sexual activity or conspiracy to commit sexual trafficking of minors is a maximum 5-year sentence, which means it's like a probably 2.5 years. So if you don't think that these laws are made to get these people off, I mean, you're mistaken, because they basically make the laws for themselves. Count 6 was sex trafficking of minors, which carries a statutory minimum or maximum sentence of 40 years. So thank God that's in there, because if it wasn't in there, she'd be looking at like 20 years. 5 probably of that 20 would be off for good behavior. But this actual last one, which thank God it stuck, count 6, is sex trafficking of minors. So you'll notice that it's either transporting or conspiracy are the other words. Conspiracy to transport, transporting a minor, conspiracy to commit, or actual sex trafficking minors. So the actual act of sex trafficking minors, not transporting them or conspiring to do so, carries a 40-year sentence. So she's looking at a maximum of 65 years in prison. I don't recall exactly how old she is, but that means she's rotting there until she dies, hopefully. Because 65 years, we're probably looking at actually about probably 25 to 30 years. I would say by looking at her, she's at least 50 years old. Let's look up how old Ghislaine Maxwell is. Ghislaine Maxwell, age on DuckDuckGo. So she was born in 61, so that makes her 50. Damn, I'm good, son. Look at that. Or 60. Damn it, 60. 61, almost 61. So December 25th. Wow. So happy birthday, Ghislaine Maxwell. 4 days ago, she was born on Christmas. Who'd have thought? 4 days later is found with 65 years for sex trafficking children. So thank God. Because, I mean, there was a lot of people who said that this had the possibility of going the other way. And I don't know how in the world that would have happened, but with all of the money involved, all of the people involved, you can totally see it. And including, the setup of the actual judge who was appointed, her actual lawyer and the approach that they were taking. Thank God. The almost maximum sentence. The only sentence that was missing was a sentence regarding the conspiracy of Jane. Jane's the pseudonym, again, of this woman who is a actress. It's pretty easy to find the name of who Jane is. After a lot of doxing by actually Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney and even Jeffrey Epstein's attorney, who came later and tried basically dox Jane at one point as well. So most people have found out who she is, but we're going to stick with Jane. Basically, that was the one thing that didn't stick. And it's interesting because they requested transcripts towards the end of the actual deliberations regarding Jane, regarding Carolyn, and regarding one more person. So to see that they I mean, they took it seriously enough. I don't see how you get to a point where, maybe they just didn't have without a reasonable doubt about Jane. And so that's why count two did not stick. Again, it was just another 5-year charge. So it wouldn't have like made or broke, made or break, make or break this trial. Jeez. Wow. That was a lot. So we're 5 of 6, happy about that. She's going away for a very, very long time. Now, whether or not that's justification or that's justice, I don't know if I agree with that. Obviously there's a lot of women out there and a lot of victims out there that we'd never even heard of and will never heard of, just due to the nature of the style of this case, and the acts that were committed on them, and just people who wouldn't even want to come out at this point, understandably. But for who had the courage to come out and who had the courage to sit on that stand and stare Ghislaine Maxwell right in the face, thank God for those women, because I'm sure there's a lot of women who they spoke for who will never see a trial, who will never go sit on the stand or face their victimizer and actually see some type of outcome, from doing so. So thank God for these women, thank God for, all of these people that spoke up and that came out, and, thank God for all of the witnesses who came out and talked and spoke about this, and the pilots and everything. So, it's a win. It's a win for the American justice system. And I think that we really do have to be happy with a lot of the results that have come out of the American justice system over these last, 2 months or so, between the Rittenhouse case and the proving that was self-defense, which was obvious to a lot of people, to, some of the actual conviction in I think it was the Ahmaud Arbery case, which was the absolute right decision, to this. So really happy. And I think that that's something that we've seen this system contend with on a regular basis, right? All of the social justice warriors, all of the media outlets that wanted to see Kyle Rittenhouse burn for what he did defending himself, all of the people that are involved, all of the media outlets, all of the powerful elites that are involved in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, wanting to see that this get buried, right? But the American justice system has faults. It absolutely has faults, right? There's a lot of, prosecution biases. There's a lot of, things that happen that aren't great. But for what I've seen recently, I'm really happy with our justice system. And I'm really happy to see that the right decision has been made, not just by the system, but by the American people themselves. So, that in a time where it's hard to buy some faith in humanity, it's nice to see these people, these individuals, making the right decision. I guess there was 6 women and 6 men that deliberated and made the actual decision regarding the case itself. So let's see what else we got here regarding that. That's it. Case shut. Ghislaine Maxwell is guilty. 65 years that she faces. Guilty verdict for Ghislaine Maxwell. 65 years she faces as a result of these 5 out of 6 guilty verdicts. And I'm so happy that she is going to be put behind bars for a very, very long time, even though we don't get to see both of them, Ghislaine and Epstein, who may or may not be sitting up on an island somewhere, hopefully is actually dead, and in hell, where Ghislaine Maxwell will find herself as soon as her sentence is done. And she's, 60 now, so 110 years old when her sentencing is over. So thankful about that. All right, so the next topic that we're going to jump into was the Project Veritas videos that came out recently. So Project Veritas had received text messages from a woman who claims to has been speaking with a CNN producer, basically, who was accused of sexually exploiting not only his girlfriend or fiance's child, but also speaking about that child to this woman. This woman came out and sent all of the text messages with the CNN producer to to Project Veritas, and there's some really, really disturbing stuff. I'm not going to read it. I had my fill of reading all of this terrible stuff with the Maxwell trial. But there's some terrible stuff. If you want to find it, you can find it. It's just on Project Veritas YouTube channel. But it's basically this guy explaining all the things that he wanted to do and how it turned him on and all this disgusting stuff. And this woman came to Project Veritas and kind of played along with these text messages. And then he asked her for pictures of like her 15-year-old. And then she finally took these documents to Project Veritas. So Project Veritas here is basically going up to this guy and questioning this CNN producer. And let's watch that here.
Hey, Rick, I'm a reporter with Project Veritas. What do you have to say about your recent accusations against crimes against children? Do you still work for CNN, Rick?
Sir, I'm done having my mouth on her. Slowly unzip my zipper.
Project Veritas exposed another creep at CNN.
Yet another producer, Rick Saleeby, at CNN, we've exposed.
So he thinks because you sent me money, you're going to get a nude photo of me and my daughter. Are you insane?
He's asked for nude pictures of your 15-year-old daughter?
Yep, mom and daughter pics. He always says mom and daughter pics.
Rick, do you still work for CNN? Do you have any comments, sir?
Yes, sir.
Once again, we ask the questions and they run away.
I love what Project Veritas does. I love that they find enough people with the balls to do this, where they just like run up on people with cell phones. And of course, these people are never going to respond. My favorite was there was like this woman who was she was some person in politics or mayor or something, and she like basically trips sprinting back to her house, and she was in no shape to be running. Anyways, Project Veritas is the best. And you heard a little bit about it there, but the CNN producer was caught red-handed, being a disgusting pedophile. And we're seeing this as a little bit of a theme there, CNN, and that meme about Ghislaine Maxwell joining CNN because of her conviction seems to hold true when you find out that Andrew Cuomo just got basically released. And he at one point was accused of sexually harassing people, and the plague of pedophilia and sexual harassment that's been haunting CNN for a while now. But just to shed some light on that. Now, following that up, we find out that basically the New York Times was barred from publishing Project Veritas documents. So let's watch a little bit about that here. That's interesting.
Held a publishing ban on the New York Times, siding with the far-right group Project Veritas in their ongoing legal battle with the legacy newspaper. Project Veritas has accused the Times of libel for its reporting on their founder, James O'Keefe. Judge Charles Wood's ruling orders the Times to turn over or destroy any copies of documents they obtained from an attorney for Project Veritas.
Publisher of the Times, A.G. Sulzberger, responded to the ruling writing, quote, "This ruling should raise alarms not just for advocates of press freedoms, but for anyone concerned about the dangers of government overreach into what the public can and cannot know."
So this one is there's a lot going on here. The Project Veritas' claim is that they have this ongoing litigation with the New York Times, and the New York Times is trying to publish internal memo correspondence between O'Keefe, maybe other Project Veritas people, and one of their attorneys. And the New York Times got this, and they were going to write about it. From the New York Times perspective, this shines right. They did write about it. Shines light on Project Veritas' shadier side. And Project Veritas is trying to say, well, this is privileged information, you can't publish this. And the judge unexpectedly and uncommonly sided with Project Veritas and has really strongly prohibited the New York Times from operating on any of this information it obtained.
Right, and then upheld his own ruling.
Right.
And the Times says it's going to appeal. It will be interesting to see how this goes, because if this stands, it's a massive blow to press freedom. And what I think, so let's start with this. I think Project Veritas actually should be ashamed of itself for pushing this, because they and O'Keefe himself talk about themselves as journalists.
And they are in what they do is expose information, or what they purport to do is
privilege,
is gather information without people's permission, conversations, secret surreptitious recordings, and expose that. That is self-admittedly what they do. So for them to say that if it's done to them, that's beyond the pale is really hypocritical. I think, regardless of how anyone what you think about this.
I don't agree politically with Project Veritas. I don't endorse a lot of the tactics that they use, but I have publicly defended their right under the First Amendment to do what they do. And when they dragged O'Keefe out of his, they raided his apartment, dragged him out, I defended him then. That is not how the government should treat any organization that is operating with protections around the First Amendment. Now, obviously, if there are some separate, unrelated shenanigans going on that has nothing to do with the publication of documents or videos, that's separate. That's not what's going on here. But as long as they're engaging within protected activities, everyone should defend them, whether or not you support them or not. Same with Julian Assange. No matter what you think of Julian Assange.
It's very akin to Assange. They published information or were going to or had.
All right, so one thing that he fails to mention there is the fact that the New York Times obtained these documents regarding Project Veritas from the actual FBI raid. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around what actually happened here in regarding the Project Veritas FBI raid. So if you're not familiar with that, basically, to catch you up to speed, the Project Veritas somehow obtained a document regarding the Ashley Biden journal. And the Ashley Biden journal goes into pretty gross detail regarding the inappropriate relationship and the inappropriate showers that Ashley Biden had with her father, that she believed in her father being our president, Joe Biden. And so within not only, within this document, within this diary that was somehow obtained of Ashley Biden, the FBI was basically sicked on James O'Keefe, the creator and head of Project Veritas. In this FBI raid, they found some type of documents that was somehow during a time where the New York Times and Project Veritas are deep in litigation. Deep in litigation. There's very many lawsuits between those two companies right now. So as a way to swing the stick, it seems to appear as if the FBI raided Project Veritas' home on behalf of basically the New York Times and the president, specifically just for putting out these documents as retribution. They didn't find anything that they ever published. Nobody got arrested. Nothing. They just broke down his door in the middle of the night and went through his stuff. And then somehow the documents that were obtained by the FBI wound up in the hand of the New York Times. So that's one thing that he failed to mention there. I'm not very familiar with what the actual documents were that were obtained by Project Veritas. I think that's because they've been sealed by this judge who said that you cannot use those because it was not legally obtained. But I can get his comparison regarding the Ashley Biden document. Although the Ashley Biden document by Project Veritas they tried to hand over the journal to federal investigators at some point. Project Veritas did, prior to even publishing them, I believe. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I remember. So I don't know if that's exactly comparable. Maybe, but I get the comparison. If you have something to hide, then for Project Veritas, you probably shouldn't be in the truth business. Here nor there. So interesting stuff, though, that it's been exposed. So now that brings us to something that's going to be our actual topic for today. And today's topic is going to be on our longer topic for today is going to be on a little bit of a throwback conspiracy. It's one that got brought up recently. I don't know if you were on the Instagram at Red Pill Revolt. You may have seen this more recently, but it interested me and it piqued my interest a little bit when we talked about Courtney Love. So Courtney Love was in Epstein's Black Book. She was also, according to her, stalked by Prince Andrew, who's also tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, we know that. So Courtney Love has a lot of shadows around her life, in her life in general. Not only her father, who has CIA ties, but also the actual death of her then husband, Kurt Cobain. And so Courtney Love is, kind of a old grunge singer herself who's done some movies and some things like that since this happened. But since then, Kurt Cobain is allegedly had committed suicide, and he committed suicide by injecting himself with 3 times the amount of a lethal dose of heroin and then taking his shotgun and shot himself. And this was all kind of out of the blue if you asked anybody but his wife, Courtney Love. Okay? So this was found and is widely accepted as being a suicide. This case has, however, had a lot of FBI documents that have been released more recently than not. I guess this was in 2000. These documents were written, and then I can't exactly tell when they were released. This is directly on the actual FBI website. So these are in the link tree right now, but if you just go to Google and type in Kurt Cobain FBI documents, it'll come up, and it's just vault.fbi.gov. All right. So, if you kind of dig into the history, Courtney Love, when she was questioned about Epstein's Black Book, she said that, Jeffrey Epstein is just a weirdo who likes to collect people's names. I don't know how my phone number and address wound up in his book. Now, if you can take that at face value, but more than likely, there's an actual tie there. Almost every time I pull down a string of what's in that Black Book, there's serious ties. And so, deny that all you want for whoever you want, but the likelihood that they're in that book and not in some way tied to Epstein is a very far out concept, right? You knew him some way. And then further into digging herself a hole is the fact that she claims that Prince Andrew was stalking her and trying to was sexually harassing her or something like that, and that but Prince Andrew and there's several other people that are out there that say that they knew each other and they were dating at some point. So the fact that there's that correlation, the fact that she knew Prince Andrew, the fact that she's in Epstein's book, and the fact that she has all of this smoke around her and her husband committing suicide at this time really piqued my interest. So that's where we started off, right? That's where we started. So I'm going to read you some of these FBI documents that were later released as a result of some prying. So let's talk a little bit about the case initially. So basically, Courtney Love hired a private investigator a week or so before Kurt Cobain killed himself. She hired them. He said that he's missing. I don't know where he is. He's crazy at the moment. I believe he might be suicidal. He's probably cheating on me. He wants a divorce and all this stuff. So she hires this private investigator. The private investigator is a former police officer. There's actually a whole documentary that I watched on it in preparation for this called... give me a second and I'll find that. But there's a whole documentary basically done by the private investigator who recorded all of his conversations with Courtney Love during this time, because the very second that he showed up at her hotel, the day that she called him, she felt like he was suspicious, or she was suspicious. He felt like she was lying to her constantly. And so some of the main details that made him believe this was that she said that she had received a letter from Kurt Cobain that was underneath her pillow, basically, and she found it a day or two after he committed suicide. They knew that that wasn't the truth because they checked the entire house on her behalf when she asked them to a couple days prior. So she was lying. She was lying about this letter that she got, and also the letter that she said she had received as a suicide note from him. Basically, there was a forensic linguist who was looking at the actual writing and looking at the actual differentiations between the actual handwriting and his actual handwriting from the letter itself. And the actual documentary is called Soaked in Bleach. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's an hour and 26 minutes. You can press the times 1.5 button like I did, and it's an hour. Worth your time. It's interesting. But there's a lot of evidence that Courtney Love murdered Kurt Cobain. And some of that stems from her actually practicing his handwriting, practicing his letters, where she would put a piece of paper over his handwriting and write them over it, where they think that's how she actually ended up writing this letter. Now, the reason that we basically know without a shadow of a doubt that this was not a suicide, more so there's two pieces of evidence that indicate that. The most convincing pieces of evidence that I've saw, just that it's not a suicide, just that Kurt Cobain did not kill himself, and everybody around him besides Courtney Love basically said that he was not suicidal, but she did, right? And that started the whole narrative. But the two things that are the most convincing two pieces of evidence, the first one being that he had 1.5 times, or 1.5 like milliliters of heroin in his system. And that's 3 times the amount of a lethal dose, and like 70 times the amount what a normal person would actually take. Like a really bad heroin addict does like 0.6. Like a consistent user who could kill themselves with 0.3 milliliters, and he was at 1.5. Now, the idea is that he injected himself with 1.5 milliliters of heroin, like 3 times the lethal dose, and then managed to grab a shotgun, place it in front of himself, and pull the trigger like with his thumb, like this, while laying down. Now, the problem with what people found in the evidence itself was that the shell casing, having the shotgun placed the way that it was, would have ejected on the opposite side of where it was found. So that to me is the most interesting piece of evidence. The shell casing was ejected on one side but found on the other side of his body, as if the only way that would have logically happened if this was true is if he shot himself after basically killing himself with heroin, shot himself with his shotgun, and then moved the shell casing from one side to the other, or it deflected off of something. And on the actual scene itself, there was nothing for it that indicated that it could have deflected off of anything. So there was a lot of reasons, but those are the major two to me. The first one being that he injected himself with a unbelievably large dose of heroin, and then shot himself. And by the time that he would have been able to do that, he would have been so high he would not have been able to even accomplish this, let alone actually follow through with it. According to a lot of the psychologists and people who were talking in this documentary, there's very few ever correlations between somebody actually injecting heroin and then killing themselves, let alone injecting themselves with a dosage that was like 30 to 70 times what a normal person would take. And then going through the trouble with still consciously, because you would be unconscious at this point, killing yourself by doing that. And then somehow the shell casing moving from one side to the other. It just didn't happen. There's no way that this happened. So there's the logical explanation for how this is not a suicide. Now, the reason that we believe that it was actually Courtney Love, and the FBI allegedly believes this, was based on the tapes and based on the body language, based on the information, based on the letters, based on the lying of Courtney Love herself. So, Let's read some of these FBI documents. All right, so the FBI documents, again, can be found just by searching, going to DuckDuckGo, screw Google, DuckDuckGo. And let's go into that for a second. Let's do a little side note. Shout out to DuckDuckGo. Shout out to Brave browser. So if you're using Chrome or you're using Safari, you are wrong. Use DuckDuckGo for your actual search engine. Use Brave for your browser, which even has Tor capabilities right on the actual browser itself if you really need something. And then shout out to ExpressVPN. I don't have any sponsors on the show. Nobody's paying me to do shit. Just those are what I use, and I think that you guys should all have privacy too. So DuckDuckGo, Brave browser. I found Brave, I think, in the last year or so, year and a half. And if I open up this little browser tab, it shows me, I've had 208,000 trackers and ads blocked, 500 and 5 gigabytes of bandwidth saved. I don't know. I don't really give a shit about that. Brave browser, DuckDuckGo, ExpressVPN. Shout out to you guys. Move it on. So these FBI records, go to vault.fbi.gov, and then you can just search for Kurt Cobain. It says, "Dear U.S. government officials, I write to you for this reason. Every family member, friend, fan, and colleague of a victim does justice. So sorry, it's kind of all blacked out. It's not redacted. It's just on crappy paper when they scanned it. I only wish to receive justice for and others who loved this man as much as I did. This man was Kurt Cobain, belonging to a band called Nirvana. It was originally thought and still accepted as the truth that he committed suicide. There has since been evidence found that he was killed and didn't commit suicide as originally thought. The police who took up the case were never very serious in investigating it as a murder, but from the beginning insisted on it being a suicide." So that's true. In the documentary, they talked to some of the police that were on staff at the time. And the person who headed this investigation, the person who was the head of the police at this time in this location, was actually relieved of duty later for a non-similar or for a similar event happening where they really just didn't do their due diligence looking into something. And this was written off as a suicide from the beginning. There's a lot of people who said, and a lot of the officers who said that, they barely even investigated this. And the only reason they did was because it was Kurt Cobain. They said, well, if their officers deemed it a suicide, the patrol officers, that they would never even send out homicide to it. So if they just said, oh, it looks like a suicide, they would never send homicide out to it. Even if there's a shotgun sitting there with the shell on the wrong side and a man dosed up with too much heroin to even be cognizant to pull the trigger, regardless of any of that information, this was 93, I think, they didn't do their due diligence like this. So it's true. Now, this goes on to say, this is a letter within the FBI documents, says, "This bothers me most because his killer is still out there, and now, because of the haste of the police department, has the chance to claim other victims." This person had terrible grammar. There is more enough evidence to reopen the case and change the cause of death from suicide to murder. Evidence like the fact that there was no prints on the gun he supposedly shot himself, the same gun that was given to Courtney Love after this happened, this same weapon, the shotgun that he killed himself with, there was no fingerprints on the weapon, and it was given to Courtney Love, who later melted the weapon down. The home that he shot himself in was later, the room was later demolished. All of the evidence, every shred of evidence that could have been left for them to look at is gone. But they also have pictures from the actual scene of the crime itself that has yet to be even, basically even shown to the public, or, what is it called when you put it under a dark light or whatever. Anyways. It says that there should be at least three sets of fingerprints. Stronger evidence was the strange way his wife was acting, his wife being Courtney Love, and what she was holding. She had a paper saying, "Get arrested." So on her at the time that she went in, she had a piece of paper that said, "Get arrested," which gave her the alibi when she got arrested prior to his body being found, and a paper where she practiced his handwriting. On this suicide note that he wrote, he mentioned nothing about wanting to die except for the part where of it that was in another handwriting and appeared to be added at the end. The information you need is in a book called Love and Death, and the same book that pointed out the triple lethal dose of heroin in his system and would have imminently incapacitated him. Thus, he could not have fired a weapon. If you would like all of the evidence, I suggest you contact the man who did the investigation. So on and so forth. All right. The next thing, and they basically respond. The FBI responds to them and says, "We appreciate your concern that Mr. Cobain may have been the victim of a homicide. However, most homicide investigations generally fall within the jurisdiction of state and local authorities. In order for the FBI to investigate complaint, we must receive specific facts that must be present to indicate that a violation of federal law within our investigation jurisdiction has occurred. Based on the information you provided, we are unable to identify any violation of federal law within the investigative jurisdiction of the FBI. We are, therefore, unable to take any investigative action on this case." So that was the FBI's response. All right. Now, another one, and let's see if this one's really even. I know there's a good one. Let's see if this is the right one. Okay. So this letter was also released by the FBI. And this letter says, "Dear whomever it may concern, I believe there was a great injustice that may have been committed in the case of Kurt Cobain. Mr. Cobain was the lead singer of a popular group from Seattle called Nirvana. They achieved a mass amount of popularity in 1991 and gained millions of fans around the world. He is survived by his young daughter named Frances and his wife, Courtney Love. The official story of the Seattle Police Department is that he took his own life. However, there are a lot of unanswered questions and inconsistencies with this. A California state-licensed private investigator named Blank, who was hired by Cobain, I'm assuming that's the same one that did the documentary itself, and the information he gathered, he also believes that his wife had something to do with it. So between the private investigator that was hired by Courtney Love, hired by her, who started doing all of these recordings on her because he thought she was guilty the entire time, thought she was lying, she seemed erratic. If you go watch the tapes and listen to her actually talking, she does seem very erratic through all of this. But anyways, a California state license plate investigator named Blank thinks there's foul play. Based on the information that he has gathered, he also believes his wife has something to do with it. According to him, this information was taken from the Seattle Police Department a week after Cobain's death, only to be ignored. Since 1994, quite a few magazine and newspaper articles have been written on this information. It has also been the subject of many radio and television shows. A book entitled Who Killed Kurt Cobain? The Mysterious Death of an Icon was published in 1998. It was mentioned in the 98 film that the couple called Kurt and Courtney. The internet has also helped get this information out with sites like CobainCase.com, homepage of this investigation, and JusticeForKurt.com. Doesn't present any new information there. All right, so nothing more to talk about on that, besides the fact that, so here's a few of the pieces of information. So Grant claims that the entire house was searched, Grant being one of the, I believe one of the private investigators. So some 20 hours later, Grant says that he and Cobain's friends searched the house again. This time they found a note left for Cobain by the male nanny. The next day, an electrician discovered Cobain's body in a room above the garage known as the greenhouse. It is the only place Grant says he and Cobain's friend did not check. The first officers to arrive at the house reported that they were on the scene of a suicide. Tom Grant strongly disagreed and believes that he found a number of inconsistencies, including questions about the alleged suicide note. Grant believes that the note is actually a retirement letter to Cobain's fans. Grant and two renowned handwriting experts believe that this was at least part of the note could have been forged. Does this suggest Kurt Cobain did not commit suicide? If so, was his death accidental or was Cobain murdered? The Seattle police are confident they made the correct ruling. They consider the case closed. Tom Grant does not. He believes the investigation should be reopened and the inconsistencies resolved once and for all. So something that we just saw there was basically that. So that was another thing that the linguistic experts said when they were reading this letter, was that the first half of it had everything to do with music. So like 3/4 of the letter. 4/5 of the letter had just talked about music and how, thank you to my fans and, so on and so forth. Let's see if we can find the actual letter itself. But the last 4th or 5th of the letter basically said that he was going to commit suicide. And it talked about his family and it talked about a few other things. So if we can zoom in here and see if this will actually give us a clean outline of the actual note itself. So it says, speaking from the tongue of it, and this is Kurt Cobain's suicide letter that was found in a sealed envelope by Courtney Love. Speaking from the tongue of an experienced simpleton who obviously would rather be an emasculated infantile complainee, this note should be pretty easy to understand. All of the warnings from the Punk Rock 101 courses over the years since my first induction to the, shall we say, ethics involved with independence and the embracement of your community has proven to be very true. I haven't felt the excitement of listening to as well as created music along with reading and writing for too many years now. I feel guilty beyond words about these things. For example, when we're backstage and the lights go out and the manic roar of the crowds begins, it doesn't affect me the way in which it did for Freddie Mercury, who seemed to relish in the love and adoration of the crowd, which is something I totally admire and envy. The fact is, I can't fool you. Any one of you. It simply isn't fair for you or me. The worst crime I can think of would be to rip people off by faking it and pretending as if I'm having 100% fun. Sometimes I feel as if I have a punch-in time clock before I walk out on stage. I've tried everything within my power to appreciate it, and I do. God, believe me, I do, but it's not enough. I appreciate the fact that I and we have affected and entertained a lot of people. I must be one of those narcissists who only appreciate things once they're gone. I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb in order to regain the enthusiasms I once had as a child. On our last 3 tours, I've had much better appreciation for all the people I've known personally and as fans through our music, but it can't get over the frustration, the guilt, and empathy I have for everyone. There's good in all of us, and I think I simply love people too much. So much that it makes me feel too fucking sad. The sad, little, sensitive, unappreciative Pisces Jesus man. Why don't you just enjoy it? I don't know. I have a goddess of a wife who sweats ambition and empathy, and a daughter who reminds me of too much of what I used to be, full of love and joy, kissing every single person she meets because everyone is good and will do her no harm. And that terrifies me to the point where I can barely function. I can't stand the thought of Frances becoming the miserable, self-destructive death rocker that I've become. I have it good, very good, and I'm grateful, but since the age of 7, I've become hateful towards all humans in general. Only because it seems so easy for people to get along that have empathy. Only because I love and feel sorry for people too much, I guess. Thank you from the bottom of the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach for your letters and concern during the past year. I'm too much of an erratic, moody baby. I don't have the passion anymore. And so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Peace, love, empathy. Kurt Cobain. Frances and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. I love you. I love you. So that was the note that was found. And I think that, from just the structuring of the paragraphs, it looks like the thank you from the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach. It seems to me like that's kind of where the conversation and the tonality of the actual writing changes from something that does seem to be completely about music. Right? Like, at 27 or whatever, 28 years old, to kill yourself, to commit suicide over mostly music it just doesn't make much sense until the very, very end of that. So the idea is that basically she forged all of the other sentences and things from past writings and then basically wrote the bottom of that herself, is the idea that this private investigator had regarding her being guilty in murdering Kurt Cobain. So let's see. So that looks to be pretty close to me to where that started there. So there's the story, guys. And it's a really interesting situation. Now there is additional conspiracy there where Courtney Love's dad has some ties to the CIA. Hank Harrison. So Courtney Love's father, this is the Daily Mail, and I haven't seen this article yet. It says, Courtney Love's father claims he can prove she was responsible for Kurt Cobain's death. This is on Daily Mail. And it says that Hank Harrison is the estranged father of Courtney Love and used to be the manager of the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead being the MK Ultra based experiment band who basically just dosed a bunch of people with LSD. The Grateful Dead is legitimately a government government MK Ultra experiment that they used the Grateful Dead for a lot of it. So he used to be the manager of the Grateful Dead. He believes his daughter was responsible for the death of Kurt Cobain, in which he said, no doubt she was capable. I can't prove she pulled the trigger, but I can prove her involvement to a high degree of certainty. He is to republish his book on the couple where he will outline his proof. And convinced by the release of the police of a note written by Cobain, it said the note was in Cobain's pocket and calls Love a bitch and a money grabber. Courtney Love. In March, police said that they had found 4 undeveloped rolls of film taken in Cobain's at the time of the death. So that's what I talked about from the actual cops, was that they took all these pictures of the actual room itself, and it was never even developed. The film was. Detectives say the picture found this year from Cobain's home at the time he died contained nothing to suggest his death was not a suicide. I guess those were separate documents. So there's basically her own father saying that she is responsible for that. Now, to substantiate my claims regarding the Grateful Dead, let's look that up. Where the Grateful Dead was basically a CIA MK Ultra conspiracy. So they basically pumped and created the actual Grateful Dead itself as a test for LSD experiments. Let's see if we can find a legitimate website that talks about that. All right, so this is a NPR article that says the CIA's secret quest for mind control, torture, LSD, and the poisoner in chief. So during the early period of the Cold War, the CIA became convinced that communists had discovered a drug or a technique that would allow them to control human minds. In response, the CIA began its own CIA or operative program called MK Ultra to search for a mind control drug that could be weaponized against enemies. Now let's see if the Grateful Dead. So this says, now that people who have volunteered for these experiments and began taking LSD in many cases found it very pleasurable. They told their friends about it. And who were those people? Ken Kesey said, of the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, got his LSD in an experiment sponsored by the CIA by MK Ultra. So did Robert Hunter, the lyricist of the Grateful Dead, who was a part of the actual MK Ultra experiments, which went on to become a great purveyor of LSD culture itself. So that's kind of where that whole idea comes from with the Grateful Dead, is that he was the lyricist was a part of MK Ultra experiments and then kind of spread it through that ideology. And Courtney Love's dad was the manager for the Grateful Dead, which is interesting even more so. So interesting stuff here. Let's see if we can find anything else on Courtney Love's dad, and then we are going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Courtney Love dad. All right, so scattered articles, but we do know that he was a part of the Grateful Dead, and he was also said that his daughter might have murdered this person. So he says, I have been, this article just on Reddit says, I have been a Nirvana and especially Courtney Love fan since I was 6 years old. 25 years later, I'm now covering as much information as possible related to her upbringing. Her father's past history of giving out endless amounts of LSD, and the theory that he was a CIA handler for Kurt, who was murdered because he was getting clean and no longer advertising the heroin chick lifestyle to the public, and in particular the youth of the time. I am curious if any of you have any information to be added to this thread. They talk about the backstory. So there's a theory that basically just says that because Kurt Cobain was no longer pushing the heroinistic lifestyle that they wanted them to, and perpetuating this drug culture, they killed him. I don't know. But what I do know is that he didn't kill himself. And what I do know is that Courtney Love is very, very suspicious in this situation. And what I do know is that both private investigators, her lawyer, and law enforcement all believe that she did it, including these FBI documents that were released. So do with that information what you will. Check out that documentary, though. I think it was really interesting. Again, it was called Soaked in Bleach. And they go over a ton of information regarding the actual suicide, a ton of information about the actual recordings with Courtney Love herself, and even more. So, good day for America. Ghislaine Maxwell is guilty. And that's all I got. See you guys next week. Hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and press it. It's right on that screen. Leave a 5-star review if you are on Apple Podcasts. We have merchandise at redpillrevolution.co. We can accept donations too. Go ahead and head over to redpillrevolution.givesendgo.com, or you can go to our Instagram at redpillrevolt and check out the link tree. You can actually just donate right on the actual link tree page itself, which is super cool. But thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate it so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Welcome to the revolution.